Welcome to NACD BoardVision, where leading boardroom advisors, governance professionals, and seasoned directors discuss critical issues related to your responsibilities in the boardroom.
Hi, I'm Christopher Clark, publisher of NACD Directorship magazine, and this is BoardVision. Today's topic is cybersecurity, and I'm joined today by Stuart Levy, co-head of Skadden's IP and technology practice. Welcome, Stuart.
Thank you, Chris. It's good to be here today.
Stuart, the so-called experts are always talking about privacy and cybersecurity, and I think there's some muddling with those two terms.
Sure.
Would you mind saying how they're unrelated and how they're related terms?
Chris, that's a great opening question. I think that the terms are related, but too often get confused by people who are talking about cybersecurity generally. Privacy today involves the issues of how companies use personal information, especially in an era of big data, how they process it, and perhaps how they use it in ways that people didn't intend. Cybersecurity, on the other hand, deals with the issue of theft of information. In some cases, that could be personal information, and therefore does overlap with privacy to a great extent. But in a lot of cases, unfortunately today, cybersecurity thefts are not just about personal information, and therefore really not about privacy, but about corporate trade secrets, plans, customer lists, things like that, that might not fall into the realm of privacy.
I don't want to get into DC or heavy-duty politics, but I think our viewership is really interested in knowing if this particular Congress will ever pass some regulation on cybersecurity.
From a privacy perspective, the challenge that Congress has, and really even at the state level, is that people aren't quite sure where they think that law should be. People do get upset when they hear how their data is being abused in ways that they didn't expect, but they do enjoy some of the benefits that come with their information being used by companies. So because there's not a critical mass of opinion as to which direction privacy laws should go in, I think we're not going to see legislation in the privacy area. In the cybersecurity area, we face some of the same concerns. There are companies that feel that they are very aware of the issue, they're addressing the issue, they don't need to be regulated to address the issue, they have their own self-preservation, if you'll have it, at heart, and don't think they need regulation to tell them what to do. There might be some guidance, there might be some suggestions, but I don't think we're going to see any regulatory action at the federal level.
Stuart, one of my favorite modes is pretending I'm a corporate director. It's not going to happen, but I'm going to pretend anyway.
Sure.
And I have the pleasure of being part of the NACD and having contact with well over 14,000 directors. But I know that there's a percentage of them that feel this way. I'm a director, I will never have enough sufficient technology expertise and depth to really handle cybersecurity and risk issues. However, I have a great IT department, they're focused on this subject, and I'm going to rely heavily on them. Now, in my mind, I may be a little strong on this, but I think it's a recipe for disaster.
Maybe said differently, and of equal concern if you're a director of an officer of a company, maybe a recipe for a lawsuit. I think at the director level, you have to have a much better understanding, and I would include this at the C-suite level as well, a much better understanding of what's really going on, and not say if there ever was a breach and a subsequent lawsuit, I really didn't know what was going on, but I know our IT people knew what was going on. I just don't think that's good enough anymore. While you don't need to have a detailed understanding of what the security protocols are at the company, I think it behooves every company to get quarterly security reports at the board level explaining what is going on, any breaches or cybersecurity threats that might have occurred, where the money is being allocated, any issues that the CTO or the CIO, Chief Information Officer, feels that the company is not addressing, maybe for budget reasons that should be addressed.
What's really on my mind, is there ever a case, is there ever an instance where there's a data breach in that board, that company should not involve law enforcement?
I think that the decision about whether to involve law enforcement or not is a tough question that a lot of companies wrestle with. The risk that you run with bringing law enforcement in is that you lose some degree of control over managing the situation. Law enforcement will come in. You might not be able to shut that off if you decide you want to sort of stand down on the issue. They might continue to pursue the issue. They might take it in a different direction that you intended. It might become more public than you intended. And so there are definitely risks with doing that. The benefits are that law enforcement has, although companies sometimes don't believe this, far greater resources than a company might have to investigate what happened, to pursue the wrongdoers, to aggressively go after the situation in a way that I think really does benefit companies. So I think you have to balance those two issues. Law enforcement, in my experience, has been on a really concerted campaign to make companies feel more comfortable dealing with law enforcement.
Are there any industries, and there may not be, that are more reticent to involve law enforcement? Is there any historicals there?
I think that regulated entities, maybe ironically, are perhaps more comfortable dealing with law enforcement because they're so comfortable dealing with regulators and government agencies generally that they might have better lines of communication with the people they might want to be interacting with in law enforcement. Whereas a company who has a data breach and has really never dealt with anyone in the government, law enforcement, regulatory agency, it might be a little bit more reticent. This would be really a case of first impression for them, if you'll have it, of dealing with law enforcement, and they might not have that wealth of experience on how to manage that process, and maybe would be a little more hesitant to do so.
I think that's a good point to end on.
Great.
On behalf of NACD and Skadden, thank you for viewing today. I'm Chris Clark, and this is BoardVision.